This program is brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Mosaic, a daily news program from Link TV, presents a selection of news reports from independent and state-controlled broadcasters from throughout the Middle East.
To Sudan now, where flooding continues and at least 60 people have been killed and over 100 more injured. Floodwater from the Nile River has devastated many villages in the past few weeks, and more rain is forecasted for the coming days. Kirsten Aiken's report focuses on survivors near the Al Aboud in the Kurdistan district.
Alive, but waiting for help. These people are the latest victims of Sudan's flood disaster. For weeks, heavy rains have seen the Nile River progressively burst its banks, inundating villages and farmland. First in Port Sudan and Kassala, then in Wad Mahdi and Al Qadarif, at Bara, and most recently Al Ubaid. This man and his 7 children lost nearly everything to the filthy tide. Now they're without shelter and are losing hope.
We were trapped. The flood took away our village and completely destroyed it. People have lost all their possessions and are staying in the open.
Some essential aid has been delivered to this isolated area, but there has not been enough for everyone. Even the starving find it difficult to criticise the ration system.
We have
not received any aid, no tents, nothing. The only good thing is the children are getting food and drinks, but there's nothing for the adults.
Floods and rains destroyed 25,000 houses. It means 25,000 families are in dire need of water, tents and other essentials immediately.
There is no word on when Sudan's latest flood refugees will receive more assistance. Weak, unable to walk much further, now all they can do is wait. Kirsten Aiken, Al Jazeera.
At least 29 people were killed in a suicide attack that targeted a bus convoy of Chinese workers, accompanied by security forces in the city of Hub in the region of Baluchistan in southern Pakistan. A Pakistani security source said a man carrying a bomb detonated himself, killing and wounding dozens, including at least 1 police officer. The explosion detonated in front of a bus station. Meanwhile, 1 police officer and at least 4 civilians were killed in a new suicide attack on a police recruiting center in the city of Hangu in northwest Pakistan.
The scene of destruction, death and injury has been repeating itself in most areas of Pakistan after violent attacks escalated following the Red Mosque events, during which government forces struck out against extremist religious men who were held out inside the mosque. Dozens of people were killed in 2 similar suicide attacks in Pakistan, one in the south and the other in the northwest of the country. The first explosion targeted a market in a village in the south near the city of Karachi. More than 20 people were killed, including 7 police officers. The second attack targeted a police station in the city of Hanju in northwest Pakistan, killing many people and wounding dozens of others. In Hub, in the province of Baluchistan, dozens were killed by a bomb explosion that targeted a bus convoy of Chinese workers, which was accompanied by security forces. The city of Hanju, which has a history of sectarian violence, is located near the Pakistani tribal areas bordering Afghanistan. For the past 3 years in the province of Baluchistan, some tribes have been carrying out a rebel separatist movement in the region. During the past 5 days, attacks have targeted many areas of Pakistan, including the capital, Islamabad. This has compelled Pakistani President Pervez Musharraf to announce that his country is carrying out an open confrontation with what he called Islamic extremists. At this point, Musharraf has refused to announce a state of emergency or to suspend the legislative elections to be held at the end of 2008. He deployed nearly 30,000 police officers and paramilitary forces to the tribal areas that border Afghanistan in order to strengthen security there.
It seems that Hamas has finally given in and accepted a previous Fateh proposal, allowing the private sector to run the Gaza border crossings, which are now under the control of the executive force and the Qassam brigades, a proposal that Israel has opposed all along. Hamas has agreed to transfer the security responsibilities in the Gaza border crossings to a national security and police force or a private security firm. Zuhair Sakallah reports from Gaza.
In the Gaza Strip, all border crossings, including Rafah and Sofa in the south, Karni in the east, and Eretz in the north, have been closed by Israel since the Hamas takeover in Gaza. The closure of the Gaza crossings has created a crisis which the Palestinians have no choice but to end.
On the very first day of the crisis, the Palestinian government in Gaza agreed to allow the private sector run the border crossings based on professional standards.
Israel has refused to reopen the Gaza crossings because it claimed that they had fallen under the control of Hamas. In order to end the passage crisis, Palestinians came up with an idea that seems to be the right thing to do at this time.
We don't have a problem with the private sector overseeing security at the border crossings. With this, Israel has no choice but to reopen the passages.
The idea of allowing the private sector to run the Gaza border crossings has received a warm welcome by the United Nations Relief and Works Agency, which demanded that Israel allow food supplies into the Gaza Strip to prevent a humanitarian crisis from unfolding there.
Gaza will soon become a community that depends totally on international aid. Opening the border crossings is the first vital step for saving what remains to be saved of the Palestinian economy.
Without a doubt, the decision to reopen the border crossings will help Palestinian merchants and traders who continue to pay a hefty price for an Israeli arrogance they did not need.
Any plan, including the privatization of Gaza passages that will help reopen the border crossings on a permanent basis, is a good plan for all Palestinians, especially those living in the Gaza Strip.
Opening the Gaza border crossings will ease up travel restrictions imposed on the Palestinians as well as help boost their economy, which in turn will alleviate their suffering and help improve their lives at all levels.
The Palestinian president's call for early elections has been reviewed by the Palestine Central Council, which has recommended modifying the electoral law earlier this month prior to holding early Palestinian elections. Fatma Abdul Karim has more on this subject from Ramallah.
The tough tone of Abu Mazen and his clear call to hold early legislative and presidential elections has triggered a new episode of reactions. The intentions of Fateh movement and the presidency was supported by many parties, where there is consensus among the PCC members representing national factions and personalities that elections is the way out. However, difficulties start to appear, according to analysts.
I think there are issues that have to be settled before, namely the division that exists now, politically speaking, principally between Hamas and Fatah, or between, let's say, geographically the West Bank and Gaza. Unless these issues are settled and some form of agreement is arrived at on a set of issues, including membership of Hamas with the PLO.
The chaotic scene in the presidential headquarters where the PCC discussions continued included the different opinions over the impediments before such decision, most importantly being Hamas's reaction to the speech of the president and his call.
It is difficult to arrange for early election because we need some sort of agreement between all political parties, and we need also preparation for that. I think this, if it happens, this will lead for more division.
Legally nothing called earlier election, and if there is a thing like that, all of the political parties should agree for this. Not just principally, and I think for practical reasons. No way to have an election
The call is near and is indeed in the hand of the presidency and the Palestine Central Council, which enjoys no legal powers but has political weight, not to mention international support. As the crisis deepens, the options before the presidency narrows down, and a resort to the people could be the decision taken, but it is surely not the easiest way. Fateh Abdelkarim, Saudi Television Channel 2, Ramallah.
The United States and the European Union held firm today to their refusal to deal with the Palestinian movement Hamas as Tony Blair prepared to start his new job as Middle East peace envoy. The Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice and Portuguese Foreign Minister Luis Amado, whose country holds the rotating European Union presidency, both rejected any dealings with Hamas, even as some questioned if the stance could compromise Blair's work with the Palestinians. Hamas, I think, knows what is expected for international respectability, Rice told reporters at a news conference in Lisbon with Amado shortly before the International Diplomatic Quartet was to hold its first high-level meeting with Blair there. In addition to Blair making his maiden appearance before the quartet principals, Thursday's meeting will also be the first at its most senior level since Hamas wrested control of the Gaza Strip, ousting the Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas's Fateh faction-led government.
Good evening and welcome to IBA News, coming to you from Jerusalem.
In today's top story, will the High Court of Justice block the planned release of 256 Palestinian security prisoners? The court heard petitions today from victims of terror organizations against the freeing of the prisoners set for tomorrow. IBA's Sheila Zucker has that story.
Israel is scheduled to release 256 Palestinian prisoners tomorrow morning as a goodwill gesture to Palestinian Chairman Mahmoud Abbas. The names of the prisoners were published on Tuesday in Hebrew on the Prison Service's website, giving Israelis 48 hours to challenge the release in court. The prisoners are being held in the Ketziot prison in the south of the country and are scheduled to be transferred at dawn under heavy security to the Palestinian Authority at the Betunia crossing, north of Jerusalem in the area of Ramallah. All but one of the prisoners have signed agreements that they will forego terror in the future. But the Al-Magor Terror Victims Association has submitted a petition to the High Court against the release. They say that it's a dangerous step and that prisoners released in the past have returned to a life of terror. They claim that the move is a gamble with Israeli lives, since 179 Israelis have been killed by Palestinians released from Israeli jails. Emmy Palmore, head of the Pardons Department at the Justice Ministry, told reporters yesterday that 17% of the Palestinians released in previous deals have resumed efforts to kill Israelis. But Benny Konyak, commissioner of the Israel Prisoner Services, said that though Palestinian security prisoners have returned to terror following similar releases in the past, most abide by their pledges not to engage in more violence against Israelis. The release will go ahead as scheduled if the High Court of Justice rejects the petitions. The court has never intervened in such prisoner releases before, claiming that they are political decisions and outside the realm of the legal body's jurisdiction. This is Sheila Zucker for IBA News.
A senior officer in the IDF said today that Israel is on a collision course with Hamas in Gaza. The same officer said that Hamas has set up a fully armed and organized army in Gaza, and the smuggling of weapons across the Philadelphia route bordering Egypt has turned into full-fledged arms imports since the IDF moved out 2 years ago. In the last 2 months alone, some 20 tons of explosives, anti-tank missiles, and even anti-aircraft missiles have been brought in, and in the not-too-distant future, Hamas will be armed with Katyusha rockets as well. The officer said the IDF is fully prepared to act against Hamas, but the decision must be made by the political echelon. And in a separate development, the Prime Minister's office today told IBA News there is no truth to Palestinian reports claiming that Israel will hand over security control of Jericho and Qalqilia to the Palestinian Authority in the next few days.
Fighting continues at the Nahr al-Barid Palestinian refugee camp between the Lebanese army and Fateh al-Islam militants. Today, the Islamists were firing rockets randomly in direction of neighboring villages in Akkar. 3 more Lebanese soldiers were killed yesterday, rising the military's death toll to an estimated 110 casualties.
As the Lebanese army closed in on the last pockets of Fateh al-Islam in the Nahr al-Barid Palestinian refugee camp, militants continued firing rockets randomly in direction of neighboring villages in Akkar. According to the national news agency, the Lebanese army took over Fateh al-Islam's headquarters at the camp. Yesterday, 3 Lebanese soldiers were killed in the fighting, while the bodies of 4 soldiers, including victims of booby-trapped buildings, were recovered from the rubble of the camp. The latest deaths brought the military's official toll to 110 in and around Nahr al-Barid and the nearby Tripoli since its battle with the Islamists erupted on May 20th. A Lebanese civilian identified as Ahmed Zahraman was killed in a seafront area of the camp, apparently by a stray bullet from the fighting. In a fight to the death, the guerrillas have lost at least 74 fighters, not including militants buried inside the camp by comrades or abandoned under the rubble. Dozens of civilians are also feared to have been killed. Doctor at a state-run hospital in Tripoli said the facility has received 39 bodies of Islamists and allied fighters since the outbreak of the fighting. And a military source said the army had recovered another 35 corpses during mopping up operations in Nahr al-Barid, much of which has been reduced to rubble under a barrage of tank and artillery fire. An army spokesman said Fateh al-Islam fighters are now in dispersed small pockets and the news is tightening. The military declined to confirm media reports that both Fateh al-Islam leader Shakir Absi and second-in-command Abu Huraira were among those killed in the latest clashes. Fateh al-Islam spoke they were willing to resume talks to end the fighting. Their spokesman, Abu Salim Taha, who had not been heard from in more than a month, told Al Jazeera television by telephone that right now perhaps there is no objection for negotiations and political solutions to return to reality.
Confrontations between the US and Iran have turned up in video games. A new video game was recently released in Tehran, similar to American video games that portray American soldiers as heroes. However, the Iranian video game dubbed The Special Operation is about the story of an Iranian soldier who tries to free Iranian hostages from Israeli prisons.
Propaganda has become an essential part of the New World Order and the media in particular. Propaganda can only be countered with propaganda that is just as or even more effective. An Iranian company released a new video game to accommodate the overwhelming popularity of the video games, especially the ones known as first-person shooter games or FPS. FPS is the most popular type of video game among internet users from all over the world. They tune in to fight and carry out special operations that can virtually accommodate up to thousands of players at any given time. Just like the games of Wolfenstein and World War II Online, the objective of the Iranian video game is to complete military assignments and to kill before getting killed. Players must destroy enemy lines and defenses until they achieve victory. Most of the games on the market use American soldiers to fill heroic roles. The Iranians say that they want to show future generations that Iranian soldiers can also defend their rights. The Iranian video game, dubbed the Special Operation, is about a military mission carried out to free Iranian diplomats from Israeli prisons. The players must successfully free these hostages. The story is inspired by real events that took place 25 years ago. The game was released on the 25th anniversary of the kidnapping of Iranian diplomats in Lebanon.
We created this game to say that we have dignity and show that we can protect our rights. We want to free our diplomatic hostages who were illegally kidnapped in Lebanon and transported to Israeli prisons.
The game's programmers began working on it 5 years ago. They had two objectives. One was commercial and the second one was nationalistic.
If the game is well received in Iranian markets, which we expect, then we can translate the game into other languages and make it available in the region and other countries in the world.
Those who support the concept of this video game say that it provides an opportunity to break the American monopoly. American companies promote American video games among old and young generations in countries with economic, political, and military challenges. The Iranian game brings to mind a similar video game that was released by a Syrian company. It was about the Islamic battles during the time of the Prophet and the four righteous rulers. Another video game named Under Siege followed, which allowed the players to go back in time and try to prevent Baruch Goldstein from attacking the Mosque of Hebron and killing and injuring hundreds of worshippers. No one knows whether these video games will be able to break the American monopoly and challenge the American Superman image. However, if Arab countries were to follow in the footsteps of the Iranian company, they will find many themes in the history of the Arab-Israeli conflict other than the kidnapping of diplomats.
In the name of God, the compassionate, the merciful, hello and a very warm welcome to Jam Network English News. President Ahmedinejad arrived in Damascus earlier today and was officially welcomed by his Syrian counterpart, Bashar al-Assad. Afterwards, the two presidents opened their talks behind closed doors, aiming to raise bilateral ties and regional and international developments. President Ahmedinejad and Assad then held another round of talks in the presence of the two sides' high-ranking delegations. Ahmedinejad said Tehran-Damascus relations have an upward trend, adding the two sides see eye to eye on many issues. He said the time is ticking in favor of Iran and Syria and against the enemies. Ahmedinejad continued, the enemies will find no way but to resign to rights of regional countries. President Assad in turn said a consensus between Iran and Syria will be the most powerful force in the region. Still in Damascus, the Iranian president took up the latest developments in Lebanon in a meeting with Secretary General of Hezbollah movement Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah. Tehran and Damascus released a joint statement hours ago stressing the role of diplomacy and conditions-free talks in resolving Iran's nuclear case. During the ceremony, Presidents Ahmedinejad and Assad underlined absolute rights of NPT members to peaceful nuclear technology, saying any discrimination against developing countries in this regard is out of the question. Iran and Syria also called for a WMD-free Middle East, drawing the world's attention to the grave threat Israeli stockpiles of nukes poses to the regional peace and stability. Iran showed on Wednesday a program called In the Name of Democracy, broadcasting interviews with 3 U.S. Iranian academics detained earlier this year on charges of harming Iran's national security. The 1-hour TV program saw Haleh Esfandiari, Kian Tajbakhsh, and Ramin Jahanbegloo reveal a U.S.-hatched plot to seek a soft revolution in Iran, also known as Velvet Revolution. The trio disclosed their connection with U.S. organizations which were run by the U.S. government. By their own accounts, the 3 Iranians used to invite university professors to meetings held in the U.S., helping them to establish contacts with Washington. The on-air revelations, which discussed American intention to hide behind democracy, prompted the Bush officials and the Western media to double their efforts to undo the chilling comments. The Voice of America called as illegitimate the remarks, saying the roundtables the U.S. had hosted were only meant to present different viewpoints in Iran. The Middle East program at the Woodrow Wilson International Center for Scholars in Washington said statements by Haleh Esfandiari lacked legitimacy. The U.S. State Department, too, rejected the program as dreadful, seeking the release of Esfandiari and Tajbakhsh. Meanwhile, Times magazine carried a report saying last night's statements by Esfandiari and Tajbakhsh, facing up to plots to bring a regime change in Iran, served as a thorn in the U.S. side. Ankara is keen on enhancing comprehensive ties with Tehran. Turkish Foreign Minister Abdullah Gül said Thursday his country is determined to boost mutual cooperation with Iran in energy sector to meet its energy needs. As for the recent measures by the Kurdish group, the PKK, the Turkish officials said Ankara has time and again warned Washington of the activities of the group.
Mortar bombs fired by suspected Islamist insurgents have missed the venue of a major reconciliation meeting in Somalia, but killed 6 civilians, including at least 5 children. The conference at a former police compound in northern Mogadishu had earlier resumed amid tight security after explosions echoed across the capital's biggest markets in the heaviest fighting in 15 days of non-stop violence. Somali Prime Minister Ali Mohammed Gaidi told more than 1,000 delegates he was confident that the landmark talks would be a success, but he said Somalia must redress its reputation as a terrorist haven. Russia has said it will expel 4 British diplomats from Moscow. The move is a tit-for-tat retaliation for Britain's decision to expel 4 Russian diplomats from London earlier this week in a continuing extradition row. British Ambassador Tony Breton was summoned to the Russian Foreign Ministry. Later, he would only say he had been given certain messages to deliver to London.
I've just met with Deputy Minister Grushko upstairs. Inevitably, what we discussed was the latest round in the Litvinenko case. He has given me certain messages to deliver back to the Foreign Office, which I will now do. I have underlined to him our continuing disappointment at Russia's reaction so far to our request for the extradition of Mr. Lugovoy, and our continuing hope that Russia will find a way to cooperate. That's all.
A Russian Foreign Ministry spokesman also said Moscow would stop issuing visas for British officials and that recent British government statements made continued cooperation impossible with London in the war on terror. Britain wants businessman Andrei Lugovoy extradited to Britain to stand trial for the murder of former Russian spy Alexander Litvinenko, but Moscow has refused. The chief U.S. delegate to the 6-party talks in Beijing on North Korea has said the talks to end Pyongyang's nuclear arms ambitions will not now set a deadline. Instead, Mr. Christopher Hill said working groups would meet to sort out technical details. He said they've missed every single deadline in the past, so it seemed more prudent not to have a set timetable.
Had we made our deadlines in the spring, I think there would have been much more appetite for announcing deadlines now. But given that we kind of missed every single deadline, I think the prudent view was let's get through the working groups. Let's see precisely how we're going to disable the facilities, how the declaration is going to be put together, how the fuel oil is going to be sequenced, especially the so-called heavy fuel oil equivalents, because as I've told you, we're not just going to do fuel oil, we'll do equivalents in terms of refurbishments and things like that. And so when we get an idea of how this is all going to work, then we'll put a time frame together and try to stay to the time frame.
The International Atomic Energy Agency announced yesterday that North Korea had now shut 5 main nuclear facilities at Yongbyon. The 6-party talks were aiming to set a date for completing the second phase of the disarmament deal, permanently disabling the Yongbyon complex and receiving a full declaration of North Korea's nuclear arms activities.
The views expressed on Mosaic are those of the participating broadcasters, not Link TV or its sponsors. Please visit linktv.org/Mosaic for more information about these broadcasters or to view previous Mosaic programs, obtain program transcripts, or receive the weekly Mosaic Intelligence Report. Mosaic is made possible by a grant from the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation. Additional support is provided by the Firedoll Foundation, the Otto Haas Charitable Trust, and by committed Link TV viewers like you. If you value this program, please send your tax-deductible contribution to Link TV, either through the website or the mailing address listed on your screen. This program was brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Link TV is the only U.S. television network devoted to global and national news, with uncompromising documentaries and diverse cultural programs which connect you to the world.